You guys are live.
Welcome to Entrepreneurstv.com. I am your host, Heather White, and it is my mission to bring you stories and lessons from some of the most incredible entrepreneurs. I've done my best to prepare questions that I think you're going to want to most know the answers to. But the coolest thing about Entrepreneurs TV is that you can ask your questions live via the chat room or Twitter. My guest today is John dehart. He is the co-founder and CEO of Nurse Next Door, where their talent is caring. He is an exceptional man. I'm so excited to have a conversation with him. My neighbor the other night, who's 93, and I was preparing for the interview and thinking about chatting with you, and she, I was telling you earlier, she's all set up to move into a retirement living facility, and as she disclosed to me, she doesn't want to go. So I'm there like so excited saying, guess what? You don't have to go. You can stay right here, and I'm telling her all about Nurse Next Door and, just what an exceptional organization you guys are, and I've had a chance to spend some time there. But I mean, this is the core of what you guys do. Talk to us a little bit about the conception of Nurse Next Door, where the idea came from, because it came from stories like this. Yeah. And what prompted you guys to start this business? Yeah,
I'd love to. I've been an entrepreneur all my life, and I was actually in the high-tech industry back in the 90s and as a tech entrepreneur. And it was fun, it was fast, it was intellectually an incredible place to be because you always had to be at the front of the industry. But I woke up literally one day and I realized I don't care about doing this. I thought making businesses run faster and better, I just didn't care about it. I wasn't changing the world, and I've always been a pretty purpose-driven person, so I quit. And I took almost 2 years off and moved back to Canada and realized when I moved back to Canada that I'd lived outside of Canada for 10 years. When I moved back, saw this deteriorating healthcare system and thought, the next thing I have to do is in healthcare, where I can really make a difference, change the world. And during that time frame, I met my partner, Ken Sim, in the business. And we had both had personal experiences in caring for family members. So with me, it was my Nana who had Alzheimer's. For Ken, it was his wife who had gone on bed rest with their first child. And we had these crazy experiences where, we both experienced caregivers coming into our homes, and we just asked ourselves, how can this possibly happen? Like the crazy things that happen. So, of course, being entrepreneurs, started looking at the industry of home care. I didn't know anything about it before I started looking at and experiencing it myself. And over the course of 6 months, realized this is the company we had to start. The demographics were obviously in our favor, and I really think that, demographics are like a rising tide that rises all boats. You have automatic growth built into an industry for a long time. It certainly resonated with the purpose of who I am. Yep. And it was this backwards industry, backwards business model. It was sort of perfect for an entrepreneur. So we started the company 10.5 years ago. And that was really the birth of Nurse Next Door.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I'm prompted to ask a little bit because you talk about your own personal purpose and this idea that you woke up one day and you just weren't feeling it anymore. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of power in that just from the entrepreneurial journey, because sometimes you do something and it just runs its course and you're done. And that's okay, but not everybody perhaps has the same amount of courage. How hard was it? I mean, you say you woke up one day and you're done. Was there a lead up? How hard was it to really make that decision?
One of the beauties of purpose and understanding your purpose in the world, your why, when you actually follow it, it makes decisions really easy and really clear. And so for me, there had obviously been a build-up. In the 90s, it was a fast time, and high-tech was fun, and a lot of people were successful, and I certainly had my success in that industry. But I saw this unethical side of business, and there was just so much money being made, and honestly in high tech, it's all about building a business model, being creative, trying to get financing, trying to go public, trying to sell. There are very few real businesses built, and I thought, I don't want to do this anymore. So So when it came time to make that decision, it was really easy. Because that's what purpose does. It makes everything so clear.
How did you know to define your own personal purpose? Like, when did that journey begin? And
yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm a very lucky person that I've always had that kind of purpose drive in me from a very young age. I've always sort of wanted to change the world. I wanted to create change in some way. And I didn't necessarily know how I would do that, but when I look back at my path, everything's about change for me. Everything's about being able to drive something for the greater good.
Okay.
And with purpose, it evolves.
Yes.
So, my purpose, or what I thought was my purpose at 19, has certainly evolved to what it is today. And it's interesting, as an entrepreneur, we talk about passion all of the time, and the lessons for students is always, well, follow your passion, be passionate about something, and you'll be great. And I think it's more figure out your purpose, or at least embark on the journey to find your purpose. And when you do that, it just makes everything so clear. So my own journey as an entrepreneur, I've been at it for 10.5 years. I've been an entrepreneur all my life, but this current company for 10.5 years. And I think as an entrepreneur, we all struggle with, when do I create my next company? And it's a struggle, and for my first 7.5 years or 8 years, I really struggled with it. I had a successful company. Oh, I have so many more ideas for so many more companies. And I always struggled with, well, when do I leave? When do I hire a team to come run in Nurse Next Door and keep it going while I build my next venture? And when I start to, as my purpose has evolved, I realized I'm doing exactly what I should be doing right now. And there's no other thing in the world that I'd rather be doing than building my current company, Nurse Next Door. And it's the one thing that keeps me going. It's the thing I wake up every day and I have this kind of cause and fight for another day. And it's not about the money. It's not about getting bigger. It's the purpose that drives me, and it keeps me here as an entrepreneur. So I think as entrepreneurs, we owe it to ourselves to at least try and figure out that purpose and in ourselves, but of course in our companies.
Yeah,
as
of
well.
course, absolutely. And it's interesting because it sounds like it's this constant inner dialogue and check-in with yourself. And you were emphatic before when you reach that point, and you'll likely be emphatic again. But it sounds like you're not emphatic yet.
That's right. It's
about
just being reflective.
Yeah, exactly. Just continuing the conversation.
Right.
So, how did you guys go from 2 guys in a Starbucks with a couple of cell phones and 6 care providers to 50 plus franchises and the incredible? Just kind of walk us through a little bit of the journey. I will dig into a lot of the details as we go, but kind of walk us through.
I'd love to. It was, it was a pretty crazy beginning. So Ken and I started off in a Starbucks, 2 cell phones. We hired 6 caregivers, and we had no idea. We'd never been in healthcare before. We didn't really know what we were doing. And although we started with a very, very clear vision of what we wanted to build, and before we knew it, we woke up. It was 4 years later, but it was almost like it was overnight. In 4 years, we had 1,000 employees. We were tracking about, almost $25 million in sales that year. And to put that in perspective, the Inc. 500 is the, ranks the fastest growing private companies in America. We were Canadian, so we couldn't be on it. We would have ranked number 3 on that list of fastest growing companies in America. And we did it organically. We didn't go out and buy companies. We did it all from scratch. So at year 4, it was crazy. We had no systems. Ken and I were not managers. We were like true entrepreneurs. And it was crazy. The wheels were definitely falling off what I call the pink smart cars. We drive pink cars.
Yes.
And I walked into the office one day and I literally didn't want to be there anymore. I didn't like my company anymore. So I walked in and I saw people doing things I didn't want them to be doing. I didn't like some of our people. They didn't like us as leaders. And somewhere along that path of real hyper growth, things changed. And as entrepreneurs, we realized we were on a great path to mediocrity. So we had this great big company, and we would have become bigger, and we were doing very well. We were we were successful in the eyes of kind of the outside world, but we realized we had this very mediocre company, and we realized we didn't want that. We realized we didn't care about being a $25 million company or a $50 million company as much as we cared about being a great company. So at that point, and that was almost 6 years ago now, we made a complete change in our business. We kind of blew up the business, and we really started rebuilding from the ground up, brick by brick, over the last 6 years. And we really did it to become a great company. And now looking back, I mean, tough decision to make. It was the right decision, and it wasn't an easy decision, but you know, we're now larger than we were at that time, so we do have over 50 locations North American wide. We're certainly in hyper-growth mode again, but we have this foundation of potential greatness, you know, and we're in this spot now where it feels so good as an entrepreneur and as a leader, where we could potentially change how caring happens in the world, and we're kind of embarking on this very ambitious plan to do that, but we have this very powerful culture. Everything's built on this foundation of this ultra strong culture. So we have the thought leadership, we have the people to actually become a great company. Whereas 6 years ago, if we didn't make that change, we could never have done that. We could never have embarked on what we're trying to build now. So that's kind of the quick story of the hyper-growth story to where we are now, which is the largest national brand for what we do in Canada. And now we're, of course, embarking on our big U.S. expansion.
Yes,
so,
exciting.
Yeah.
Like, I've had a chance to spend some time in Nurse Next Door, and I cannot say enough about the brand and the culture. And I mean, I've never seen, you know, the school of sort of personal development be so integrated into an organization before. And I certainly haven't spent time in every company or anything like that, but again, having been there, I mean, you guys have your own language. Can you talk a little bit about, I mean, what a brave decision to blow it up, as you say, and to start from the foundational layer again. So absolutely huge kudos, you know, for doing that, because I think, you know, there had to be some people that were like, don't do it.
For sure.
Just keep going,
For
keep
sure.
growing,
Yeah.
Sell this thing or whatever, right? But the brand and the culture, what you guys have going on there is incredible. Talk a little bit about what were those conversations like, and when you talk about this core driver now that lives underneath everything.
I you know, when you say brand and culture in the same sentence, it resonates with me because I actually think brand and culture are the same thing. And so it started 6 years ago when we kind of blew everything up. We had 25 people at head office managing our 1,000 people in the field. And we fired 10 of those people in one day because they were the wrong people. And I had walked in one day and realized that, I mean, both Ken and I realized we didn't want to be there. We didn't have the right team, didn't have the right company. We didn't know how to do it. So, you know, one of our great learning lessons at that time was we realized we weren't the smartest guys in the world, but we didn't have to be. All we had to do was figure out who has done what we need to learn to a world-class level, learn from them, and execute on it. Everything's already been done. We call it R&D, rip off and duplicate, right? And so we realized, we started to study the greatest, most enduring brands in the world. We looked at Starbucks, we looked at Disney, we looked at Southwest Airlines, a number of other companies, and we really did an in-depth study of those organizations. And we found they all shared these raving fan cultures. So they had all of these people inside of their cultures that made their brand come alive and made their companies enduringly great when it really came down to it. And when we scratched below the surface of why they had these raving fan cultures, what kind of created this Kool-Aid inside of these organizations, they all shared one thing in common, and it was core values, your how, core purpose, your why, and what I would refer to as the painted picture, or this real crystal clear vision of the future. They all shared those. So when we started to build Nurse Next Door from the ground up, we started building from that foundation. We didn't even think of brand at the time. We just knew we had to have that foundation as the fabric, the DNA of our company, the DNA of our people, the DNA of our culture. And so over time, as we really started to perfect that and we started winning all of the top employer awards and the top culture awards, we realized that that is our brand. If we can tap into how it feels inside of our company, and when you walk in our office, you get it, don't you?
Absolutely.
You just know that you're in a different place where, I mean, people are energized, they're jazzed, they're living our core values in an almost maniacal way. And if we could tap into that and extend that into our brand. So as a consumer, when you feel our brand, when you experience our brand, when you see our brand, you kind of get the same feeling. And that's what we've been able to leverage and do. I mean, I would say it's still evolving. We're just in the early stages of evolving that process. But that is why I say culture and brand is the same. They're the same thing.
It's the feeling.
Yeah, it's the feeling.
And your talent literally is caring. I mean, that is the feeling that the whole place embodies, and everybody that's there. I remember calling there one time and hearing, I don't even remember exactly what the verbiage was, but I remember having a holy S moment, because I was like, oh my God, you just asked like an awesome question. It was like, how can I make your life better today, or something like that.
So that's our purpose.
Yeah. I was like, you just stop people in their tracks, because we're so used to hearing the same things, and we kind of get into habitual patterns in life and get a bit robotic, and you guys don't do that. You guys have this totally different language.
It's a language. So when you're building culture or building a brand, so I always start with culture, because I sort of look at the Southwest Airlines model. The most successful business in history, I would say. 40 years of growth, 40 years of profitability in the toughest industry in the world, Southwest Airlines. And I mean, they have mastered building their brand from the inside out. It starts with culture, then it becomes a brand. And part of building a great culture is having your own language, having your own identity. Because culture, it is your identity. Your culture should not look or feel or sound like any other culture in the entire world. It is who you are. And so once you have your core values really identified and alive in your organization, then you can start building that identity in terms of your own language. And so we have created our own language, the way we talk. To us, it's about caring, not just healthcare. So healthcare is almost a banned word in our company. We're a healthcare provider, but you can't really say healthcare in our company, because it really isn't about healthcare. It's about caring. When you tell the story about your 93-year-old neighbor, she doesn't need health care. She doesn't have to move. She doesn't need to move into a nursing home. In fact, that would be the worst thing in the world for the liveliness and the life of her. She needs caring. And so that is what we do. It is our talent. And so building a great culture, building a great brand, a part of it is creating your own language. So everybody talks the same, and they talk the same way, and you as a consumer, you're just dealing with a different company. You know it as soon as you call us. This is a different organization, and that's a foundational block to building a brand, isn't it?
How did you guys know to do that? Like, you studied the other companies, you saw what they were doing. Did you recognize that they had their own language? Did somebody tell you that, or like? You
know, it's interesting. I'm going to go back to the purpose filter again. So when we started to build our next door, and you know, we grew really fast. We were becoming a very mediocre company. Our service was sort of the same as everybody else's, because we really didn't put the attention there. We put our attention on growth. And when we started to rebuild, when it came to looking at our core purpose of why we do what we do, just beyond making money, the question was, how do we become a purpose-driven company? How do we bring that alive? It's one of the great challenges. There are very few companies in the world. I would say Apple, Southwest Airlines are two companies in the world that have truly built purpose-driven brands. So it's almost the holy grail of building a brand is, how do you build a purpose-driven brand? And I struggled with that for years. Even though I know purpose so well, I struggled with, how do you build that into a brand? How do you build a purpose-driven company? And over time, as our purpose has evolved, I realized we have to start asking ourselves one question. When we look at every system, when we look at every hire we make, when we look at any change in our company, we have to apply the purpose filter. does this really make lives better? Because that is the purpose of our company. When somebody calls on the phone and we answer their phone, how do we make a little bit of a difference in their life, right? That's really the question we have to ask. So we start looking at our systems and asking the purpose question, and that is where the language came. When we looked at our service and everybody did assessments and everybody did healthcare and everybody did, they managed care. Well, we're not them. We're a different company and we're a purpose-driven company, so how do we get there? Oh, we start changing the language. We sound differently. We make it appropriate to our purpose. So the pushback when we made changes, this is just a different way to build a company. So one of the biggest pushbacks was we changed the name of a care manager to a care designer. And in healthcare, people just aren't open to change. It's just not an industry ripe for change. And so when we made that change, most of our care managers, and we have today over 150 care managers, well, they're care designers across the country. Many of them wouldn't change the name. It's easy to manage care. It's really difficult to design care. Designing care is an art form. That is what our people do. It's an art form. So that is why we made that name change to reflect making lives better. So that's how it's all intertwined.
Oh my God.
So it's a complicated process, but it really does come back to how can you drive purpose throughout your company? That's really the question.
I love it. There's a simpleness to it, not to be mistaken with easiness.
Right. Yeah.
Right? But there is. I love that. There's this filter that you get to run everything through, which allows you to make decisions. Sometimes hard decisions, like firing 10 people in one day. What was that? Right. Tell us, for those that are interested, because there's the personal side of you, the human side of you that goes through that, but then there's also the business side of you. You're the leader of the company. It's your role to lead the company.
That's right.
You've made this decision about having a core purpose and following that and using that as your filter, and then that requires you to make a decision that looks like firing people in 10 people in one day.
That's right. As entrepreneurs, we go through what we call the emotional roller coaster of being an entrepreneur. And it's all a series of ups and downs, and there is a reason why there are so few entrepreneurs or business owners in the country. It's a very, it's a handful of a percentage of the population. Most people can't hack it, right? Or most people start and they cannot hack the ups and downs of the emotional roller coaster, and so they sell out, they stop, they go on, they move on to the corporate world. When I look at the emotional roller coaster of my own entrepreneurial journey, I look at that day as the bottom of the bottom, when we realized if we were going to do this, we had to make massive change. And you know me as a human being. I'm not, firing isn't my favorite thing to do. I love people, and so it was a really tough moment. And I remember walking into the room to make that call, and I actually looked at a woman who I still admire and love today, and made the wrong call on that person. She was kind of grouped in with the rest of the group, and I remember looking at her when I did it, and it kind of brought that human element to that hard process of firing. So it was a tough day, and it comes back to your core values again, and so Walt Disney says this. He says, when you live your core values, decisions become really easy. So it becomes really clear what you should do, and that's what core values are. It tells you what you should do, not what you can and can't do, what you should do. But to actually make the call is tough.
Yeah.
And it's why so few leaders, so few organizations in the world actually live their core values. So we create these core values, we put them on a wall, and they kind of die on the wall. They become page 1 of your training manual, and they never see the light of day. And it's sort of the whole 1% vision, 99% execution thing. We fail to execute on our purpose and our core values because, honestly, it takes guts to live your core values.
Absolutely.
Core values aren't for the faint of heart.
Yeah, no.
In fact, we call them our hardcore values because they are hardcore.
Yeah.
They're the non-negotiable rules of how you do things in your company. And when I go back to that day, as hard as it was, I was living our core values that day. I was just saying It's taking a stand and saying, you know what, as an organization, this isn't the right way to be. So
it reminds me, like I often tell clients, and I'm just having an epiphany right now. Maybe this is one of my core values, I didn't even realize, is what's right for you is right for everybody. And sometimes you just know first, if you know what I mean. Like I've had, you have that hard conversation or whatever, exactly what you had to do. I'm curious, and maybe you don't know, but those 10 people, whatever they went on to do, was right for them.
Absolutely. I mean, it kind of goes back to when you, as a leader, you have to make those tough calls to free up somebody's future. You know, ultimately, and over time, you get used to it, and you just realize it's part of what I have to do as a leader, part of building a business. Firing is just part of it, right? It's part of leading, it's part of managing people, hiring and firing. You have to get great at both hiring and firing. You have to be as great at firing as you are at hiring. And you do realize, and I mean, it's never an easy thing to do, but you do realize that when it comes time to firing somebody, the right way to do it, and I ask my leaders the same 3 questions. They don't have to come to me if they're going to fire someone, but they know I'll always ask them, did we live our values? And did they see it coming? As long as somebody sees it coming, and they know before you do.
Of course.
Right? They're not happy either. If they're at the point of being fired from your organization, I guarantee they are not happy employees.
Absolutely agree.
And you're actually
setting them free.
As hard as it may be for them, you are freeing up their future to probably, hopefully, go find something better.
Yeah.
Right? Ultimately, it comes down to that individual, and I can't be accountable for that individual.
And you're not responsible for them.
Right.
But you are responsible for your hardcore values.
Yeah,
and if
right.
you play your role there, they have an opportunity to play their role in taking responsibility for their life. I mean, we're all responsible for our own lives. Oftentimes, we defer the responsibility, unfortunately,
to our employer
or
whatever else.
But that, by being the employer that you are, you create a culture that then creates an opportunity for people to either fit in or...
That's right, and I mean, it's one of the powerful ways to build culture is around this foundation of core values. And it's interesting because we're so caught up, I find most people don't understand what culture is. And we get caught up in what I refer to as cosmetic culture, which is, the fun things, the bring your dogs to work, the cocktail Fridays, kind of those fun, the pool tables in the office, I call them the nice to have perks. It really is a cosmetic surface level part of culture. Those are the first things to go away when crisis happens, right? And crisis always happens. It's part of building a business. You can never avoid challenges and crisis. And those things are fun for a time, but they disappear. And core values and purpose, they are the foundational elements that get you through those crises. And when the pool tables and the cocktail Fridays disappear because your employees don't really care about them anymore, the core values and purpose, that's what stays and that's what sticks. And that's what makes you an enduringly great organization, an enduringly great employer, because they stand the test of time. They don't go away. And that's the most important thing. And I find... And I speak about this worldwide, so I get to speak to thousands and thousands of entrepreneurs and leaders who build businesses, and we just don't get it. We think we have to have these fun perks, but it's not the way. They're nice to have. You need to build that foundation. You need to build the soul of your company first.
Yes. Oh, right? Beautiful. I love that. Build the soul of your company.
That's what core values are. Your purpose is your heart.
The pool table is just a decorative.
That's
It's
right.
the nice suit or whatever. It's the outside decoration.
In a company, your soul are your core values, your purpose is your heart.
Oh, beautiful.
That's what it is.
Yes.
That's the foundation of everything we should be doing, right?
I love that.
Yeah.
Now, you guys have an incredible hiring process now.
We do.
Talk a little bit about, we talked about the firing thing, and and now you've got this process where it's extensive. I mean, talk about your willingness to put that much emphasis around getting the right people on your team, and how you went about designing the process you go through, and a little bit for the people watching about what the process actually is.
Well, it's one of the most important parts of building culture is hiring, and I mean, you speak to any successful entrepreneur in your life and you ask them their greatest learning lessons, and it will always come back to people. We always get people wrong. And I mean, if you look at hiring in the corporate world across North America today, we have a 50-50 shot of hiring properly. So essentially, you might as well go and flip a coin. You're going to have as great of a success flipping a coin as you do in hiring in today's world. So hiring, and I feel that happens because we hire based on experience and nothing else. That's what we typically fall to. And we usually don't have the right systems in place to actually hire the right people. The other 50%, so 50% of hiring is talent, maybe experience, but I call it talent. 50% of hiring is culture fit. It's a 50-50 thing. And I don't care if somebody has the greatest talent in the world. If they're not a culture fit, you aren't getting hired. If you're a culture fit but you don't have the talent, you're not getting hired. And so we developed and designed our entire process around figuring out the 50-50. So it is tough to get hired in our company. It's a long, long process. But you realize to build a great company, to build a great culture, you have to get incredibly disciplined in your hiring process. So we adhere to a system called top grading. General Electric uses the system of top grading. I would say one of my mentors is the guy, Brad Smart and Jeff Smart, the father and son duo that created this system. When that system is followed, you have a good 90% plus accuracy in your hiring.
Wow.
It's a tough system to follow. It took us years and years to implement, but it's a highly disciplined process and it works. Right?
And then you get the right people.
Yeah, get the right people on the bus.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's such a huge cost to business to get the wrong people there.
Yeah, it really is.
Because you spend money training them, and then you have to hire them or fire them, and then you have to rehire, and it's yeah.
And then we put our culture filters throughout our entire process. So from day one, from the moment you read an ad, we have our culture filters because we're trying to attract the right, and we're equally trying to repel the wrong people.
Yes.
We're all about attracting the right and repelling the wrong, and we're very proud of that. Nurse Next Door is not the right place for a lot of people, and we're proud of it. We are a very defined culture that is the right fit for some. It's completely the wrong fit for some people. And we want to make it really easy for you as somebody trying to be hired into our company to understand if we're the wrong fit or not. So we put our culture filters all the way through our process. And it often means we don't end up hiring the most talented people. And that's a hard thing, but over time it allows us to build what we built, which is a great, enduring culture. And as long as we don't deviate from that, so my job as a leader now is ensuring those checks and balances are in place as we grow and get into hypergrowth and double our team in the next year and a half. My job is to ensure that's always upheld.
Regardless of the pressure that you might have going
and there's
into
always
hypergrowth.
pressure.
Of course, and that's the tough part of being the CEO.
That's right.
You know, I mean, that's your hardcore role.
It
you know,
really
you
is.
have to be emphatic and convicted about that, and not make exceptions because one little. It's like that old analogy. You know, you got one rotten apple, and it spoils the whole bunch. And that's what happens. I mean, that's what happens in the body when people get cancer. I mean, that's what happens. Is you just get when it starts to grow and manifest, and
That's right. You cannot build a raving fan culture without that person. And so often in organizations, that rotten apple, or what I define as somebody who doesn't live the core values of the company, so often they're the A player. So there's somebody that's nailing their numbers, in fact, probably exceeding those numbers, and they don't live the core values. They're the most dangerous employee you could ever have because everybody else is watching them. And they watch this high performer not live the core values of the company, and then they say, well, I don't have to either. And the hardest, so we always say core values make decisions really easy, but actually executing them is really difficult. And so often we fail to fire. We're coming back to firing again. And
that's okay.
And
I think it's brilliant. This is a brilliant point for people to hear.
That's the first person you have to fire in your company. Someone who is exceeding performance numbers but isn't living your core values, that's the rotten apple. That's the most dangerous person in your organization because until you clear that out, I mean, you just can't have a great culture.
But
so
so many people make that mistake,
yeah.
and they keep them there because of fear of losing somebody that's
absolutely.
a top performer.
And when you do it, and we've done it before, and you often only have to do it once, because it sure sends a strong signal to say we are completely serious about culture. I mean, we're drawing a line in the sand. These are our hardcore values, and you better live them. I don't care if you're the highest performer. You will not work here. And your numbers do take a hit
Of course.
when you have to do it.
Of course. But again, you're trusting your foundation.
That's right.
You know, you're not just going to go and build a tower out the side without making sure it fits with the foundation, because you know, it's not stable.
I mean, I'll quote Jim Collins, so it's not just coming from, you know, little entrepreneur John. Jim Collins, author Good to Great, has the great quote, "Eject those who don't fit like a virus." Right? So he's the first one to say, get the right people on the bus, get the wrong people off the bus really fast.
But again, I think we don't want to make the mistake that the wrong person is just somebody who is kind of lackadaisical or not, or whatever, has a bad attitude or whatever. It's often the person, like exactly what you're talking about, who is absolutely exceptionally performing in certain areas, but is not living the core values. And as the leader, that's your hard job.
Yeah, if somebody's living your core values as a company, this is the philosophy we take. If you live our core values and you're an A player, or you're hitting your numbers, you are an A player.
Yeah.
You're the star. And we try and build our culture to have as many of those as we can.
Yeah.
Because then we're a real high-performance culture. For those who, don't live our core values, don't hit the numbers, that's obvious. As an entrepreneur, that's obvious what you have to do with those people. For those who live our core values and aren't hitting those numbers, that's our job as a manager, as a leader, to get those people, to get those employees up to speed, to get them to at least get close to hitting their numbers. That's our job. That's our job as managers and leaders, right?
So hire for fit, train for performance on those other things.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's simple, but it's not always easy to execute. I want to talk about vision, because I'll never forget, I sat in a meeting in Nurse Next Door, and it was so cute. There was a woman there who had seen your painted picture, the video that you guys did, and I'll give you a chance to talk all about everything. And on the video, there's a picture of you guys on the front of Time magazine. And she thought it was real. She was sitting there and she said, "Oh my God, you know, I'm just so pumped to be here, and you guys on the front of Time magazine and whatever." And I thought, I was sitting there, and again, being a practitioner of visioning and vision boarding and goal setting my whole life, I was just like, oh my God. I get goosebumps thinking, because that's what it's all about. It's making it so real that it's believable, that that's what you're manifesting that into your experience, and again, over time. So talk a little bit about the painted picture, how important you believe vision. I mean, you teach this at MIT, or you did. Vision, still do. Talk about that, and what is the painted picture, and how this has helped in terms of
when I talk about vision, when I refer to vision, I really mean it. Vision is really three things. It's your core values, your how, your core purpose, your why, and your envisioned future painted picture, the where. And so when I get to the painted picture part, the envisioned future, it's not a one-line sentence of we're going to be great, or we're going to be the biggest company in the world. It is a highly detailed, vivid description of where we are going in the world, right down to what our uniforms will look like in the future in 15 years. That's how much detail we put into the painted picture. And it really comes from, I mean, I was an ex-athlete and played in the World Championships in hockey. And I was lucky enough to have visualization experts walk us through, back in those days, beating the Soviets and winning the gold medal. And I realized high-performance athletes, Olympic athletes, they envision the outcome. And then they reverse engineer everything they need to do to achieve that outcome back to today. So why don't we build businesses that way? Right? We all set out as entrepreneurs, as business owners, with a great vision. We're going to do great things. We're going to build a great company. We probably have some level of detail in our brains of what that looks like. But we always veer off path, because when challenges hit, and they often hit really early on in building a business, we sort of lose sight of the vision now, the envisioned future, the painted picture. So my whole thing is, you better get it all out on paper. You better get it so vivid. You better look into the future and peer in to say, what exactly do we look like? What do our customers say? What do our products look like? How does our service feel? What awards are we winning? Everything we want to happen in 15 years' time, and let's get it down on paper, let's get it down in pictures, and let's look at that every day. So I look at mine every day. And what it does for me is that, as I say, and I come back to again, when crisis hits, we don't lurch from crisis to crisis. We stay on our path, we know what's important, we always keep that front and center and at the top of our mind. And it's a very powerful thing when you see what you know you should be doing, and you look at it every day, and you see it, and you read it, and you understand it, and your team knows it, more importantly, you start to make things happen. So with the Time magazine, the actual quote on the front was, when we designed our painted picture 5 years ago, it said, "Healthcare is changing forever. Revolution is happening around us." We're starting to become known as sort of a change agent in healthcare. In Canada, and I mean, even in the US, we're starting to become that change agent company. So I know it's a matter of time. Might not start with Time, but there are magazines and there are publications coming to us to say, what are you guys doing at Nurse Next Door? So I really believe, as crazy as it may sound, give us 10 years and Time magazine will have said something about the revolution happening in healthcare and how we're part of it. So that's what drives me. It's part of my vision, part of our purpose. It's why I wake up every day, and it's what we're really driving towards. Yeah.
And there's something about putting it out there.
Yeah.
Because now you have other people believing it, you know. I mean, you have your team absolutely bought totally in. But, you know, you have an external person who just is believing that that's what it is. I mean, this is what we're talking about. You talk about an energetic force.
Oh, it's amazing. It's and those things are happening all of the time. So in our painted picture, it's very vivid. And when I speak in my speeches, I give examples of our painted picture. I did a keynote for the 911 centers across Canada 2 years ago. And in our painted picture, we are becoming the 911 service for seniors in the future. And I put that out there. And of course, I had a number of managers come to me to say, let's sit down and chat because we're having problems in the 911 service servicing seniors. I know that will happen. And so when you do put it out there, things happen, right? So I have so many examples of that. And it sounds kind of corny. And I don't believe in putting a Ferrari on the wall and hoping that it will happen. But I do believe in putting something in writing or pictures on a wall with having a complete plan, reverse engineered from the outcome to today. What am I doing today to make that happen? And then focusing on it. When you get to that level, that's when those things start to happen. Right?
I think the reverse engineering is not to be overlooked.
No.
And again, you talk about going to that end result and being emphatic about the detail of it. And only if you do that will you be able to reverse engineer it in a way that you know, like, okay, in order to achieve that, what did I have to do? You know, the month before, the quarter before, the year before, and you start backing it up. If you don't get clarity around that, you would never be able to do that process, and therefore you would never be able to know today is what I'm doing contributing to where I'm trying to go.
That's right.
You just would not be able to measure that effectively.
1% vision, 99% execution.
Absolutely love it. Yeah. What do you say to the person who says, I don't have time to do that?
Don't start a business. Don't become an entrepreneur. Or do it, and you're setting your path to mediocrity.
Don't be surprised.
You will be a mediocre organization. You will never. Hard to become a great company. I mean, it really is. So if you want to build an okay company, you want to be, you know, moderately successful, then go out and do it. It's you know, every entrepreneur I think has to make that decision. Do I want to build a okay company or do I want to build a great company? If you make that decision to say I want to build a great company, it just takes a completely different focus, a completely different discipline, kind of a fanatical focus on certain elements of that, and it takes time. Jim Collins, I saw him in a keynote speech about 2 months ago, and I took a number of our most successful franchise partners in the country to see Jim Collins, and he said that well, it takes 19 years to become successful. So there's no overnight successes, and there really are very few of them. Even Apple and a few other companies, he actually showed their timeline, and at the 25-year mark, that's when they really took off. Yeah. Apple and Microsoft.
So you have to know
took
where you're
25
going.
years before
like,
they really took off as
yeah.
organizations, right?
Yeah.
And became really great organizations.
Great, yeah. But they were being great all the way along. We
That's
just
right.
didn't know about it because
That's right.
they hadn't taken off yet.
Yeah.
Question from our audience. What makes a great franchisee?
Good question. Yeah. No, that's the question that every franchisor has, and no one's really been able to scientifically to validate it. So I think it changes for every business. For us, having that passion for our purpose of why we do what we do is just paramount. I mean, so many people are looking at our industry and saying, "Oh, I can make a lot of money because of the demographics." Well, if you're just in it for that, you will not like this business. So if you're passionate about helping others, if you're passionate about making lives better, that's the first thing we look for, really important. For us, it's about, I think on any business owner, tenacity and drive. I mean, I see so few business owners and entrepreneurs and even potential franchisees without that fire, right? Without that tenacious drive. And I mean, Heather, you're an entrepreneur, you know what it takes. You need that tenacity to run through that brick wall when things aren't going to work, because you're always facing obstacles as a franchisee, as a business owner, and it takes that tenacity to drive through it. I think that's really important. And then third, I think, well, working really hard, but having a family to support you. I think it's just an overlooked part of being a successful entrepreneur and business owner. Being a business owner, being a franchisee is a very lonely place, right? And it's that dinner time support. It's that breakfast time support. It's that support that all of us entrepreneurs, to become really good at what we do, we need it. So for me, it's my wife. I have a great, wonderful wife who's every much as involved in Nurse Next Door as I am, emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally. Yeah. And if I didn't have that, man, I don't know if I'd be where I am today. Yeah. As a leader, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner.
It's funny that you mentioned the loneliness piece. You know, I've never been asked this, but if I was asked, you know, what do you wish somebody had told you before you did this? I think that would be it. You know, that there is, you need to build or design your life to match your own needs, because that loneliness is something that nobody really tells you about that's going to happen.
For sure.
Especially when you leave a corporate environment and you leave, you know, a camaraderie, a group of teammates, you know, that you're used to. It's easy for you to pick up the phone and meet 4 or 5 people for lunch. It's no big deal. When you're an entrepreneur, it's a different ball game in that capacity. So I think that's great advice for people, to have. And if you don't have the family support, build in your support network. And you have to design it. Again, it's back to responsibility. Nobody's going to hand it to you. You have to go out and figure out what do you need and design it and make it happen and create it. How do you tactically communicate the values to your care managers? What processes or activities do you use?
Yeah, great question. I mean, communication is such a vital part of what we do, and it's, as a company grows, it is the most complex part of building a company, is creating all of those mechanisms for communication. So when it comes to the core values, my first piece of advice, I call it build systems of craziness. I always say just get crazy about your core values. Your core values will never change. So it's a very important thing to understand. Everything will change in your company, your people, your systems, your strategies. Everything is going to change over time, except one thing. It's your core values. They never change. So knowing that they never change, your job as a leader is to inculcate your people, your culture with your core values. And that means repetition. That means driving them home every single conversation, every single time, every chance you have to tie in an action to your core values, you do it. And when your people say, John, enough talking about your core values, I get it, I know what they are, that's when you do it more. So over-communicating your core values is really important. When you think you're communicating enough, you're not. You need to do more. And that's the simplest way, the most effective way to bring your core values alive in your business and your culture, is just keep talking about it. And when you tell your team member or employee what a great job they did, don't say what a great job they did and leave it. Tie it to your core values. Tie it to how they lived your core values. That's how you start to reinforce it. And then step 2 would be start telling stories about it. Start creating legends and stories around your core values, because people mimic what others do and they get recognition for.
Yeah.
So if you start to figure out your core values and publish stories and create legends around your core values, and then tell the story over and over and over and over, people will wake up and say, ah, that Heather sure is getting a lot of recognition for living this core value. Maybe I should do the same. That's part of human nature. It's how we act.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, mimicking. I mean, look
It's
at a
pure-
child.
it's
Look
almost
at,
like
look
peer
at a
pressure.
baby. Absolutely. That's how they learn. They mimic.
Absolutely.
They mimic.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. And you talk about reinforcing it back to the foundation again. And if you're building anything and you're constantly tying the growth back to the foundation, I mean, again, simple, not easy, but so profound when you do it that way and you build the strength within the organization. I love it.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about mentoring, both personally and professionally. Like, do you use mentors yourself? And also within the business, I'm fairly certain that you have an advisory board, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, we do. It's we've had a number of different advisory boards over time, and this time we got it right. So I would say our advisory board, we actually treat like a real board of directors. So, I mean, we're at the size now where we're on our path to $100 million in sales and over. And we realized that we have to start acting like a $100 million company. We're not quite there yet, but we will be in a few years. We better start acting like it now. And so we created a board of advisors. I have a great, one of my mentors is Judy Brooks. She's on our board. You know Judy, of course. She's also our chief of staff at Nurse Next Door. And with her, we created a board of advisors. I think Bob Elton, I saw, he might be on your show in a couple of weeks. So he's one of our board members. So one of my mentors would be Bob as well. And we put this board together. We didn't necessarily want to go find the biggest names in the world. We wanted members who would get really dialed into our business, really engaged, help us on not necessarily a day-to-day level, but a month-to-month basis to help us become that $100 million company, help us act like a $100 million company. And so we set up this entire governance structure where we now act like a $100 million company. I may be the co-founder of the company. Ken and I are the two shareholders in the organization, so we direct everything at the end of the day. But I now am a CEO. I report to my board. They can hire and fire me, even though Ken and I own the company. So we really act and use this board as our guide. And we actually meet with them every month. We have full 4-hour sessions. And it's hard. It's a great way to run a company. I wish we would have done that earlier. I wish we would have becoming what I would say a real company earlier in our time, and we would be so much further ahead if we did.
Interesting. And by that, do you mean like just that level of accountability in terms of structuring it that way?
You know, it's interesting. So I now ask entrepreneurs. I say to them, so you're the leader of the company, you're the CEO of the company. How would that change if you weren't the owner? And it's often a question. It's a question I've had to go through over the last year as I've gone from being a co-founder and the leader of the company to becoming sole CEO of Nurse Next Door with a board, with accountability to get us to the next level. I've gone through that change myself and realized that to get to the next level, I have to act like a different person. I can't just be the founding CEO anymore. I have to be the CEO. Put my founding hat, put my shareholder hat off to the side and actually learn to become a real CEO. And when I pose that question to entrepreneurs that have never thought of that before, never gone through that phase, it's somewhat of an enlightening question for them. Right?
It's a very interesting way to look at it.
Yeah,
because from a role perspective, they're perhaps very different in terms of execution.
We are only accountable to ourselves as a business owner at the end of the day, or our partners, and we can become lazy.
Again, back to the mediocrity. If you want to push, if you want to develop, if you want to grow.
That's right.
I like what you're saying in terms of acting as if. I don't get the sense at all that you're talking about faking it till you make it, but more like, again, really embodying that and then like leaning into it and then growing into it, and then you are it, and then you got to put the next thing.
That's right. So we're putting all the mechanisms in place that we need as a $100 million company. They're actually in place now. And when we hit that $100 million mark, we'll then look at the $500 million mark and we'll say, what do we need to have in place to become that company? And we'll start building those mechanisms in place now. So if you're running $1 million business or a $100,000 business, look at what you want to become and start acting like it.
I love
really
it.
what it is.
No, I love that. I just think there's, and also to know that when you reach a goal, and being an athlete, and I've been an athlete, you know, I don't know if I'd still call myself that, but there's something really important about making sure that even before you reach the goal, you're already thinking about where do you want to go next. Because there's something about momentum that creates a lot of strength and energy movement within anything that you do. But if you hit a wall, your goal, without having, you can almost sink a little bit, and you know, to get that energy going again, to get the momentum going again. So I love what you talk about in terms of when we are getting there, we're going to be thinking about where we're going to want to be there.
And that's a painted picture again. Painted picture is that picture of the future. It's not really the now, it's what we look like in the future in 5 years and in 15 years. And that's the power of the painted picture. It's always having in somewhere in your sight and your team's sight where you are going and what's really important. You'll always have your quarterly goals, your weekly goals, your daily goals, your annual goals. It's really, I mean, those are the most mission critical parts, but those have to be part of a bigger picture.
And again, you won't figure that out unless you do the painted picture.
That's right.
Get the clarity, reverse engineering.
Absolutely.
Not to be overlooked, because that's how you'll tie all those pieces together. What's been the best part of this whole experience for you?
Oh, the best part, you know, honestly, so in my organization, we care for people, and honestly, when I get that phone call, and I get them almost on a weekly basis now, and when I get that phone call from a friend or a friend of a friend, or a family member who calls me up, and it's usually at 9 o'clock at night on a Friday night or some odd time, or calls my wife and says, I need help. And they're usually it's usually a pretty tough situation. They've heard some really bad news about a family member. When I get that call, and my wife and I are, you know, the first people they reach out to. That is a very special thing for me, and it's it goes back to purpose. And when I realize that I'm doing the right thing and I'm where I'm supposed to be right now, when I get those calls, that's it. So I love building a great business, I love building culture, I love seeing it all happen, but it still is when I get that call and it's all hands on deck, and I'll get really involved in caring for a friend and helping out and making sure everything's good. That's my family's passion, right?
And you make their life better.
That's right.
That's what you're about, making the world a better place.
That's it.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story and chatting, and there's no question in my mind where you guys are going.
Thanks,
100 million and beyond.
That's right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you all so much for watching, and we will see you next week.